Welcome all to Monday, to Countdown Day, and in my neck of the woods we are still within the grip of the blistering heat of summer and 100-degree temperatures if you use Fahrenheit, 37, 38, 36, 37 if you use Celsius. We're not used to this stuff, and it's lasted now a little while. A couple of weeks has been quite the heat wave, but that's not what you're here for, is it? No. You're here because it's Countdown Day. Last week, we looked at the top 10 Transformers who could lead the Decepticons, who were not already recognized leaders. And it got tangly because a lot of people voted for characters that are, at one time or another, within fiction, recognized leaders. Maybe not in the fiction they were referencing, but in some fiction. And this is cross-fiction. And that was challenging because, especially in Marvel UK, a lot of Decepticon leaders went through there and went through those fingers. For example, a popular one last week that I even thought could be and should be included was Cyclonus, even though he sort of co-led in Marvel UK with Scourge. As was pointed out to me after, however, Cyclonus actually wouldn't count because he did lead at the end of RID 2015. He was the main guy. He was the top guy now for the Decepticons. RID 2015, of course, carrying on following Transformers Prime. We went through, Megatron disbanding the Decepticons at the end of Prime. That went into Starscream leading certainly some Decepticons. I don't know how much of the army, but by the end, certainly the Decepticon forces that still existed and whatnot, like Cyclonus was like a main guy, right? So he couldn't really count. It's all a little bit iffy and a little bit open to conjecture, but what wasn't open to conjecture was the clear winner being Onslaught. Because he hasn't led. He's led the Combaticons, but he's never led all of the Decepticon forces. He's never been what we would call the, Emperor of Destruction, right? The Autobots I figured would be much easier. I said, who could lead the Autobots Maximals? One character that could lead the Autobots Maximals who's neither a Prime and has never been Supreme Commander. I figured that was going to eliminate a lot, even though I knew I would probably still have to do some research on some other possible entries. Just so we're clear, with that caveat, it immediately should have eliminated from contention Primon, who passed the Matrix onto Prima, who passed it on to Prime Nova, or Nova Prime if you will, who passed it on to Guardian Prime, who, there's argument about this, but suspiciously, it looks like he could be the twin, if you will, of Hot Rod. Guardian Prime to Zeta, who was pretty tyrannical. From Zeta, either to Sentinel or Nominus. It depends on the fiction you're following. I'm going to say Nominus, and from Nominus to Sentinel. From Sentinel to Optimus, Optimus to Magnus, Magnus to Rodimus, Rodimus to Rodimus disappeared with the Matrix, at least if you follow Japanese fiction, which would be included here. That left as Supreme Commander Fortress Maximus. Fortress Maximus led to Metal Hawk for a very short time. Metal Hawk to Jinrai, or Ginrai if you prefer that pronunciation. Then Victory Saber, or Star Saber if you will. Then Die Atlas. And then somehow, someway, Rodimus must have given the Matrix back to a revived Optimus, now going by the name Star Convoy. Then we get to the Beast era, much later, and Optimus Primal. Though, to be fair, in the English-speaking world, he was the captain of a ship. In Japan, he was the Supreme Commander. Followed by Leo Convoy, or Leo Prime, again being a Prime. Big Convoy, or Big Prime, again being a Prime. So none of those could count, but there were some others. And I really hope that a lot of voters would do their due diligence and kind of research before they gave their vote. They didn't. So I ended up having to go and do that research, but it's to your benefit because we're not going to do one, we're technically going to do two countdowns this time around in the latest GotBot Counts Down. one hail, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. As always, please like, comment, share, of course, subscribe, and while you are at it, light 'em up, baby. Hit that notification bell, please. It helps me out a ton, and I'll let you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel. Check out Machinery of Man, The Everything Factor, all of the groups that I'm either a mod or an admin for, as well as all of my social media links. All of that is in the description down below. Also in the description down below, and if you're in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. Check us out on Patreon. See what we have to offer to you through Spring, or of course hit the join button at any given time and become channel member. And as I said, this will be the top 10 Autobots who could lead the Maximals slash, or I guess I should say the top 10 bots who could lead the Autobots slash Maximals that's never been a Prime and that's never been a Supreme Commander. But the voting went a little sideways with it. We're going to kind of actually kick things off very quickly, and I'm not going to be showing these. I'm only going to cycle through them very fast and explain why they were disqualified. We're going to do a top 9 of ones that had votes that are all excellent picks, would be magnificent leaders, but they can't count because either they've been a Prime or, as I outlined, they have been like a Supreme Commander, right? But there were 9 of them. The first being, now I think this one is a little bit wonky, to be honest with you, Cheetor. By the very end of Beast Machines, Cheetor is obviously primed to be the next successor to Optimus Primal. And he does have a connection with the Oracle. Newsflash, the Oracle is Vector Sigma. Vector Sigma is the Oracle. Actually, the Oracle, if you go back in history, the Oracle became Vector Sigma, and Vector Sigma went back to being the Oracle. It's a whole thing. However, because of Collector Club, BotCon maybe, I can't remember, apparently way in the future, Cheetor evolves to become Alpha Trizer. And Alpha Trizer is a recognized leader, and therefore Cheetor, by way of his commune with the Oracle and probably some development into Alpha Trizer off screen, meant that he technically wouldn't count, but he had votes and he definitely deserves a shout out. Number 8 would be Nova Prime. Doesn't count. Somebody said, yeah, but he didn't lead the Autobots because he was, you know, there were no Autobots and Decepticons back then. Maybe not, and I get it, he's like expansionist and whatnot. But he's a Prime. He was a Matrix bearer, he was a Prime, so he couldn't count, but an excellent one. Leo Prime, or Lio Convoy, same thing, he's a Prime with a Matrix, couldn't count. Plus he was a Supreme Commander. Starsaber, Supreme Commander. He's explicitly in Victory called the Supreme Commander of the Autobots. And if you go after that, to the first Zone episode, he explicitly hands off leadership to Die Atlas. Who else do we have here? Optimus Primal. Again, he's part of the Prime lineage. He's a Prime technically. He's also a Supreme Commander, certainly in Japan. Ultra Magnus. Ultra Magnus would have been number 1 if he could count. And I agree. Ultra Magnus definitely should have led. And he kind of did. He was a Matrix bearer. Optimus named him successor. Optimus gave him the Matrix. He had it in the movie. He was the recognized Autobot leader, even if for a short time. Much like Starscream had a coronation. He was the Decepticon leader, even if only for a hot moment. Besides that, in animated, Magnus is the Autobot Supreme Commander as well as the leader of the Elite Guard. So he couldn't count, but an excellent pick. Vector Prime, another Prime. I said they couldn't be Primes. That was in the question. Grimlock, who I had to double check on, he would have been popular as well. And I mean, again, he couldn't because in the comics, certainly Marvel UK, he was Supreme Commander. I feel like at the very end of the Marvel run itself outside of the UK, I feel like he was like named like the next successor, and it sort of ends with Grimlock's going to be the next leader. I feel like that's where that ended. But I know in Marvel UK he was a leader, filled the power vacuum. After Optimus disappeared, if I'm not mistaken, Fortress Maximus also could not count because after Rodimus goes, oh, pardon me, if that shook, that's my fault because I hit one of the tripod legs. After Rodimus decides to go off and look for a new home planet, never to be seen again, by the way, he names Fortress Maximus as the new, or Fortress as the new Autobot Supreme Commander in his absence. The Prime is gone. We never see him again, so Fort Max Supreme Commander. Those couldn't count. The only other honorable mention, and this was one that had votes, didn't make the list, but also wasn't disqualified because he's never led. But man, I think he would have been great because of the character arc and development that went into him. Beast Wars Dinobot. He ended up becoming so honorable and so heroic and so much willing to sacrifice himself for saving the human race to stop Megatron and the Predacons. Man, he had all the makings of being a great leader. He absolutely could have done it. So that is the disqualified list, as well as one honorable mention. None of them made the actual list of Autobots, Maximals that could lead, who have never been a Prime and never been a Supreme Commander. Who is on the actual list? Well, you know what we're going to do. We're going to kick things off with number 10 up first. Kicking us off at number 10 is a huge surprise by way of Hound. Yeah, Hound, normally a scout. However, those that voted for him said, you know what, why not Hound? In the Age of Extinction movie, in sort of Optimus's absence, he kind of, sort of, de facto led the Autobots in battle in China, I think it was. And I kind of see where they're getting at. He certainly had a few qualities of being jovial, of being inspirational. In G1, those that vote for that iteration of him said, look, he tends to be calm, he tends to think things through, he doesn't usually act too rashly, and he tends to like other planets, other species. Look at how much he enjoys Earth. While somewhat young and probably inexperienced, Hound definitely had the makings to continue onward and one day aspire to great things and great heights. And he probably could have been a wonderful Autobot Supreme Commander. And for that reason, he takes the number 10 slot. Now, coming in at number 9, we have an argument for this character actually really similar to Onslaught, who was number 1 for the Decepticons. And it's Silverbolt and all of his lieutenants. Silverbolt would be the Autobot Supreme Commander. The lieutenants would, you know, kind of pick up the slack and be his... I guess his top-level crew that he would consult with, right? You know, I mean, a leader needs lieutenants, right? Silverbolt overcame so many odds. He overcame his own fears, and that alone is inspirational, because if he can overcome his fears, his fear of heights, maybe you can overcome yours as well. Again, calm. Again, needed to learn how to have an ego boost. He learned so much from Optimus. Optimus believed in Silverbolt, believed in his ability to lead, believed in his ability to be better than he thought he could be. He learned so many lessons that he, as a leader himself, as a Supreme Commander himself, could pass forward to other Autobots and inspire them to be more, inspire them to be better. How can you argue with that? How can you argue with him being a leader and then having all of his lieutenants to help with tactics and strategy and policy? Yeah, at his core, at his spark, at his heart, he has all the makings to be an inspirational leader. And with the help of his lieutenants, he has everything that he needs to be a strategic leader. Silverbolt takes the number 9 slot. 8 is an interesting one by way of Cop. And those that voted for him really voted for 2 things. They said, A, he's old and very experienced. He's seen it all, he's done it all, he's been it all. But B, he's pretty much indestructible. I mean, Cup is always losing body parts and stuff. He just gets put back together and keeps going. He's tough. He's rugged. He's also somebody full of experience and intelligence. Look, you can have a fancy matrix. You can have all of the pieces of paper in the world, all of the fancy degrees and diplomas you want, but nothing, literally nothing, in life, in work, in business, in school, in Transformers, is a replacement for actual experience, and Cop has boatloads of it. So what's the one flaw that would keep him from being a great Supreme Commander? He wants to tell too many stories more than he wants to lead responsibly. Maybe we're seeing Cop at a point in his life when he would be like a retired commander, kind of like what Starsaber did when he handed leadership off to the younger Atlas. Yeah, Cop, with all of his experience, with his toughness and ruggedness, would be a great leader, and he does inspire a lot, and they do enjoy hearing his stories. Cop takes the number 8 slot. Number 7 is Arcee. Now, this is the Studio Series 86 Arcee. To be fair, the votes for Arcee, well, this is the one I'm showing off. The votes for Arcee were actually split between her IDW, you know, like tough version, the one that the Generations Arcee is based on, with her blasters and her swords and stuff. It's a great version of Arcee, honestly. And even with the black highlights, I think it works well on her. I think it's great. And an even split really with the Prime Arcee, so I lumped them all together. Because Prime Arcee is, she's tough, she's badass in her own right. Don't look any further than that episode with Arachnid when she protects Jack, right? Like, she's very capable, very intelligent, suave, has a sophistication and a style to her, a likability to her. Yeah, Arcee. There's a few versions of her. Don't get me wrong, not all of them would make great leaders. I don't think the animated would particularly be a great leader, but the Netflix one, she probably could be. Even in Rise of the Beast, Arcee is second in command there to Optimus Prime. There's an argument for her. She has, you know, in some fiction, gotten to the point of really being upper echelon. And could she one day lead the whole army? Probably. Probably. She has all the tools, and Arcee takes the number 7 slot. Now, I love number 6 because it's, ooh, Jetfire. Or Skyfire if you prefer. I prefer Skyfire, so I'm putting Skyfire up in the corner there, or I already had it up in the corner. It's probably gone by now. We're going science. Skyfire is very intelligent. There's no doubt about it. Very smart guy. He's a scientist. That alone, intelligence, helps him to be an effective leader. Secondly, he's also being a Decepticon. In fact, if you go with the Netflix trilogy or the War for Cybertron Netflix trilogy, he has already served as a leader of sorts by way of leading the Seeker. So he has leadership experience. He knows a lot of Decepticon secrets and would probably know how to use them against him. Plus, though he doesn't like battle, as a nice, peaceful Autobot leader should, if it really comes down to it and he has to engage in it, he has the size, the heft, and as demonstrated here by this guy, the firepower to be a force to reckon with. Give him a Matrix and all of that wisdom with it, and man, oh man, he might just well be one of the most powerful Autobot leaders there ever was. There's a lot of qualities he has and a lot of arguments as to why Skyfire would be an excellent Autobot leader, and enough fans feel that way that he took the number 6 slot. And now a hush falls over the crowd, and we are at the ever-popular, ever-coveted halfway mark. And at the halfway mark today, we have Alita 1. Now, some people might say, oh, didn't she lead the Autobot resistance on Cybertron? Indeed she did, but that's not the entire Autobot army. That is also not a role of the Supreme Commander. While she did lead the Autobot female resistance on Cybertron, in essence, once they were discovered, she still led under Optimus Prime, her boyfriend. Some people might say, well, what about the Netflix trilogy? Here's the thing. She's led segments and groups, but she's never been the actual Supreme Commander. That said, because she too was rebuilt by Alpha Trion, because she too is linked so closely with Optimus Prime, and because she too does have leadership experience in terms of segments of Autobots, she probably has all of the knowledge and tools necessary to be an effective overall leader. She hasn't been, but she certainly could be. And fans felt strongly enough about that she was able to take the number 5 slot. And now we are at number 4, and at number 4 we have Prowl, demonstrated here by my custom Earthrise Prowl. The mold is being re-released in that 2-pack with a bit of damage here. Arguably a better head. But nevertheless, a lot of people said Prowl. And those that voted for him said, look, I mean, he's an officer. He's by the book. He stands for law, order, justice, all that stuff. And depending on the fiction, he really does. In fact, in a lot of fiction, he's a really likable guy. Capable, combatant, knowledgeable, knows the rules, knows how to follow them, and has inspired other law enforcement bots, such as Strongarm, for example. So, most voters said, while we are voting for him, not the IDW version. That guy's not a good guy. He's not great. I don't really know, didn't read the comics, but that's what I hear. Prowl, the police officer. Law, order, justice, and the Autobot way takes the number 4 slot. Into the top 3, and the top 3 are very interesting. I thought that they would appear here, but I didn't really think they would be in the order that they're necessarily in. At number 3, we have Ironhide. How can you argue with it? Look, whether we're talking in the movies, where I would say for that trilogy, he really served as Optimus's second in command, certainly after Jazz was torn in two. And he did lead the desert battle in, was it the first movie? Was it the second movie? I don't know, the third movie. There's a desert battle, and really he sort of leads that desert battle, and it's obviously the Bayverse version. In G1, he was, one of Optimus's right-hand guys, and I feel like Ironhide is probably best as a wartime battle Supreme Commander. In peacetime, I feel like he might be a little too ornery for it. I don't know. Maybe he would adapt quite well. But because he was one of Optimus Prime's most loyal, most trusted lieutenants, and often did lead missions and segments of Autobots, he has the experience, he has the firepower, and he has the grit, will, and determination to lead. How can you argue with it? Ironhide, a great lieutenant, and possibly a wonderful Supreme Commander, and he takes the number 3 slot. Number 2 is a case of, well, always being a bridesmaid, but never quite a bride, by way of Springer. What do I mean when I say always being a bridesmaid, but never being a bride? Twice in the comics, as well as, because I think Magnus names him a successor in the comics, as well as in G1, because a couple of times Rodimus Prime names him as his successor. But he never gets the Matrix, and he never actually leads. He's always like that first in command. It's like if you're a Star Trek The Next Generation fan, how often was Commander Riker offered a captaincy and turned it down to remain the number 1 officer, the second in command of the Enterprise, right? That commander of the Enterprise. Well, he's kind of the same thing. He's always the second in charge, never quite fully in charge. Now, some might say, whoa, whoa, whoa. He did lead the Wreckers. Indeed, he did. But much like Alita, that's just a segment, that's just a group. And I think people voted for him because he was named successor twice. I think people voted for him because he has leadership experience as a leader of the Wreckers. Plus, he did look up to another great Wreckers leader by way of Impactor. And he knows what that burden is like because he did try to live up to other Wrecker leaders. Could he translate those skills into being full-on Supreme Commander? Probably. And because he's kind of worked through how to live up to being a good leader by way of the Wreckers, right? Because he kind of often said, I'm no Impactor, right? I'm not as good as Impactor. But I think he grew into that leadership role. I don't think he would have to say, I'm not as good as Rodimus or as good as Optimus. I think he'd already be past that because of his past experience with a smaller group. I think that he also has the grit, and I think he also has the combat ability to be a great Autobot leader. I don't know if he can get past his own jokes and sarcasm to give inspirational speeches. Maybe a Springer Prime he could. I don't know. It's one of those cases of what could have been, what could be explored. Maybe one day we'll see Springer as a full-on Autobot Supreme Commander. But for now, we'll have to put up with him being a successor to the throne. But because he never made it, he was allowed to count, and Springer takes the number 2 slot. Tippy top number 1, going back to G1, and another of Optimus Prime's most trusted lieutenants. Ironhide on one side, certainly when it came to the battlefield, but I think when it came to thinking things out, being a little calmer, a little more rational, you gotta go with Jazz. Jazz, number 1, was never full-on Supreme Commander, was never full-on Autobot leader, certainly a lieutenant, led a few missions, would certainly kind of toe the line of what Optimus was saying. He believed in the Autobot cause. He was also jovial, nice guy to be around. He was likable. He could inspire others. He could lead others. He stayed cool and calm under pressure. Even when all of the Autobots turned bad, he stayed cool and calm. He had a heart, but he even took the most dire, most serious of circumstances and tried to kind of break the tension, which sometimes is very much needed. On the battlefield, very agile, capable, strategic. If he was, say, a wrestler, he would be what we call a technician, right? Not like a puncher, not a striker, not a brawler, not a high flyer, but definitely a technician. He has finesse, he has class, he has style. How can you argue with Jazz taking the #1 slot for being a future, possibly, leader of the Autobots / Maximals, and possibly a future Prime? Jazz takes the #1 slot. And man, 10 down to 1 once again. Holy moly. Other ones that had votes: Skylynx, Rhinox, Blaster, though I'm not sure if Blaster, I feel like it was, he was never a leader, but I think like Springer, he was like a possible successor. Thunderclash, I think that was a cool one. Dinobot Slag, I thought was an interesting one. Who else do we have here? Razor Beast, I thought was a cool one. Big Bang, Warpath would be a neat one. Ratchet being a leader. How about Impactor himself, Bumblebee, Beta, whatever Beta is, I don't know what that is. Bulkhead. Who else? Megatron, specifically the IDW Comics Megatron who became an Autobot. Hotspot from the Protectobots. Strongarm, Chromia, Windblade, the City Speaker, and just for funsies, Blur. Them and more had votes. Let me know if your favorite made the list, or the disqualified list, or the honorable mentions, or the mentions here at the very end. I appreciate you guys coming by, giving me some of your extremely valuable time. I do know how important it is to you. If you are in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. Check us out on Patreon, see what we have to offer to you through Spring, or of course, hit the join button at any given time and become a channel member. While you are at it, please hit the subscribe button, stick around, have some fun with us here on the channel, and especially don't forget, especially remember that somehow, some way, each and every single day, you right there, you do make a difference in the world, whether you know it or not. And I look forward to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either in the live streams on Thursday nights, at the stop motion premieres, or the old-fashioned way right here inside the videos.